Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today Tonix is filing an 8K and I'm seeing a very important update on their cash runway and early sales numbers. Quick note, this is not financial advice, just my take on public filings for educational purposes. Tonix Pharmaceuticals appears to be setting expectations for the near future with these preliminary results. And some of the trends are worth highlighting. Alright, so what we have here is an 8K filing from Tonix Pharmaceuticals Holding Corp. This is basically a report to the CSE that announces material events that shareholders should know about. Think of it as the company proactively telling investors about important stuff that is happening, usually pretty quickly after it occurs. The earliest event date for this report is May 1st, 2026. The main event here is item 2.02, which is all about the company's financial performance and condition. Tonix is giving us a peek at some early results for their first quarter of 2026, which ended on the 31st of March, and also some financial snapshots as of the 30th of April. This is helpful because sometimes companies release these preliminary numbers before the full audited financial report comes out. It helps manage expectations and gives investors an early look. Let's dive into the numbers. First up, they're reporting about $185.5 million in cash and cash equivalents at the end of March. That is the total amount of readily available money they have. Now, as of the 30th of April, they had just over 15.5 million shares of common stock out there. This is important because it gives you a sense of the company's liquidity and how many pieces the ownership pie is cut into. Now, this next point is a pretty significant change. They used about $40.2 million in cash for their day-to-day operations during the first quarter of 2026. That is a pretty big jump compared to the roughly $16.6 million they used in the same period last year. When a company uses more cash in operations, it means their business activities are consuming more money. This isn't always bad, especially for growth companies investing in new products or expanding. However, a jump this large definitely warrants a closer look at what is driving that increase. Speaking of investments, their capital expenditures also saw a big increase. They spent about $1.7 million on things like property, plant, and equipment in the first quarter of 2026. Last year, that number was a tiny $6,000. This suggests Tonix is investing more in its infrastructure or long-term assets, which aligns with a growing company. But again, it contributes to the overall cash burn. Okay, let's talk about sales. This is where things get more interesting. Their net revenue from selling their products in the first quarter of 2026 was approximately $6.9 million. This is a huge leap from the $2.4 million they made in the first quarter of 2025. That is almost a threefold increase. This indicates that their products are gaining traction and selling much better. Breaking that down, revenue from Zembrace, SimTouch, and Tosima brought in about $3.2 million this quarter, up from $2.4 million last year. So those existing products are showing solid growth. But the real star appears to be Tomya. This product, launched in November 2025, generated approximately $3.7 million in revenue in the first quarter of 2026. Looking back at its initial launch period from mid-November to the end of 2025, it already made about $1.4 million. This means Tonya is contributing significantly to the overall revenue growth right out of the gate. Now, tying all this together, the company believes their current cash, plus about $17.4 million they raised from selling more stock in the second quarter of 2026, should be enough to cover their planned spending until the second quarter of 2027. This is what we call their cash runway. Knowing they have enough cash to operate for at least another year is a critical piece of information for investors, especially given the increased operational spending we saw earlier. It is really important to remember that all these numbers are preliminary. The company says they're still doing their final accounting checks, and the actual audited results could be different. This is standard practice for early releases, but it means investors should look at this as a strong indicator. Not a final verdict. PricewaterhouseCoopers, their auditor, hasn't reviewed this preliminary data, so they aren't giving any opinion on it yet. This is a disclaimer to make sure investors don't rely solely on these early figures. They expect to file their full quarterly report, the 10Q, with all the verified numbers around May 11th, 2026. So, we'll have the official picture soon. Then we have item 8.01, other events. This section just incorporates the information we've already discussed from item 2.02. It is essentially saying that the financial results and condition details are relevant to any other matters the company might be reporting on. And finally, we have the signature and date. This is the formal sign-off by the company's authorized representative. In this case, Bradley Sanger, the Chief Financial Officer, on May 1st, 2026. This just confirms who is officially responsible for the filing, so What does all this mean for Tonix Pharmaceuticals? On one hand, the increased cash burn from operations and capital expenditures shows they are investing heavily, which is typical for a company in the biotech space trying to grow. However, the very strong revenue growth, particularly from the new Tomya product, is incredibly encouraging. They've almost tripled their revenue year over year, which is a fantastic sign that their products are resonating in the market. The fact that they believe their current cash will last them into the second quarter of 2027 is also a positive signal regarding their financial stability in the near term. The risk I'm watching is whether this strong revenue growth can continue to outpace their increasing operational costs. If the cash burn continues to climb faster than revenues, their runway could shorten. What I'm actually looking for is how Tonya continues to perform, and if the company can maintain this impressive sales momentum. Oh, and the research tools I actually use are linked in the description. They help keep this channel going. That is my take. Stay decoded. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description.